Our cover story is about a notorious prison in Syria, the horrors of which are finally out in the open. The Sednaya prison was out of bounds for the world when the Assad father and son duo ruled Syria. But after the fall of the Assad dynasty, the world gets to see the inside of this prison for the first time in decades. We take you on a never-before tour of Sednaya, from high in the sky to deep underground, to uncover its dark and dangerous secrets. Human rights organization Amnesty International called it a human slaughterhouse. This is a story of terror, torture and tyranny. A warning: some viewers may find the images and videos disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. As soon as the rebels, led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, seized Damascus, Syrians swarmed the notorious Saydnaya prison, desperate for news of loved ones who vanished during the 54-year-old rule of the Assad dynasty. Some walked for hours to reach the hill where the infamous building stands, climbing over the sand barricades surrounding it. A line of cars could be seen stretching over 7 kilometers. Thousands of relatives camped outside the prison overnight. Families huddled around campfires, braving the cold as they waited for news of their loved ones. When news of Assad's fall became official, a large crowd broke into the security zone and entered the prison through its narrow doors to free the inmates. Videos on social media showed dozens of gaunt men emerging from the dark holding cells. Shaven-headed, near-skeletal prisoners looked visibly stunned, barely able to give their names or say where they were from. Some were too weak to walk. They had to literally crawl their way out of the prison. Others were carried out by their fellow inmates. Among those freed were young children held with their mothers. Images of the former captives walking free, haggard and emaciated, some needing help even to stand, were beamed around the world as a symbol of Assad's fall. Those unable to locate their loved ones rummaged through documents scattered on the ground in search of their names. Thousands of the intelligence files lay abandoned, many of them scattered on the floor, detailing the activities of ordinary citizens subjected to draconian surveillance by security service agents. When their search ended without success at Saydnaya, many rushed to the Harasta hospital for news.
Rima Mohammed Adil Al-Turk, and this is my brother's name, Adnan Al-Turk, from Al-Kaboon neighborhood.
The hospital is located 30 kilometers south of the prison complex. It served as a main center for collecting the bodies of detainees. The bodies would be sent to Harasta from Saydnaya, and from there they'd be transferred to mass graves. At least 35 corpses exhibiting signs of torture were found at the hospital. Eyes and teeth gouged out, blood splattered all over. A decomposing body's ribcage peeked through the skin.
We received 35 bodies, all from Sednaya. Bodies, as you can see, are mutilated and dismembered, unidentifiable. God our Safiz and the best disposer of our affairs.
The bodies were placed in white plastic bags or wrapped in white cloth, some stained with blood. Corpses had pieces of cloth or adhesive tape bearing scribbled numbers and sometimes names. Some had recently been killed. While some of the dead were wearing clothes, others were naked. People were either screaming or covering their noses from the stench. Elsewhere, people forced open the steel doors of mortuary refrigerators to see if their friends or family were inside. Videos and photographs showed bodies wrapped in blood-stained white shrouds piled up inside a refrigerated room at the hospital. Using only the light on their mobile phones, wailing men and women examined disfigured bodies lying in a darkened hospital morgue for signs of their relatives.
There are distinguishing features, like a tattoo, a wound, any distinguishing sign. This is for general forensics. For forensic dentistry, we do a dental study. There are forensic dental specialists who study the teeth, checking if there are extracted or replaced teeth. And through this, their families can identify them too.
Saydnaya, a grim symbol of the Assad regime's atrocities, sits atop a hill on the outskirts of Syria's capital, Damascus. The military-run facility, located 30 kilometers north of the capital, is one of Syria's largest detention centers. The complex is surrounded by barbed wire. A recently captured drone video has revealed images of the infamous prison complex. The Y-shaped building resembles a three-bladed ceiling fan. The prison was constructed in the 1980s to accommodate 5,000 inmates, but since a civil war erupted in 2011, it housed between 10,000 to 20,000 people, many of whom were opponents of the Assad regime. Since the 2011 uprising, more than 100,000 people have died in Syrian prisons, often under torture, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a United Kingdom-based information office which has documented human rights abuses in Syria. It says that 30,000 people had been detained at Sednaya, where detainees endured some of the worst torture, with only 6,000 released. Saydnaya was notorious for the use of torture and human rights abuses. The regime deliberately held detainees under inhumane conditions, subjected them to repeated torture, and systematically deprived them of food, water, medicine, and medical care. Weekly and sometimes bi-weekly executions were carried out by hanging in the early years after the 2011 civil war. Up to 50 individuals were executed at a time. The methods of torture included holding the detainees in painful stress positions for prolonged periods of time, burning with car battery acid, the pulling of fingernails, electrocution, scalding with boiling water, and rape. Other common methods of torture included the dulab, forcibly contorting the victim's body into a rubber tire, and falaka, flogging on the soles of the feet.
Former detainees told us of being held in stress positions. For example, their wrists were bound over their heads and then suspended from the ceiling with just by their wrists. Then they were beaten, they were electric shocked, there was sexual violence, psychological torture, and usually all these different forms were used together in a combination. So during almost every interrogation, detainees faced this catalogue of horrific ill treatment.
The cells that were used for solitary confinement are so small that there isn't even space to lie down. Inside the solitary confinement cells, there was water and mud on the concrete floors. Each had a single metal bowl for food. Excreta lay around. As many as 80 prisoners per cell were crammed into the larger ones, forcing inmates to take turns to sleep, recalls a former detainee. A former prisoner told Amnesty in 2016 that there are 48 solitary confinement cells in one ward, measuring just 1.8 meters by 2 meters or 2 meters by 2.5 meters. They were allegedly often used to lock up 15 people, with light being filtered through tiny holes and only for few hours a day. Group cells were even more cramped, with 28 prisoners packed inside, and they had to kneel, their backs to the door and their hands covering their eyes each time a guard came in, recalled the witness.
Sednaya is like a silent prison. There is a severe silence. The people can't raise their voice or speak freely. Anyone who raises their voice is subject to punishment.
When we were beaten in front of the cells, I had seen a lot of blood on the floor. There was a rancid and bloody smell.
Saydnaya now stands empty. More than 4,000 inmates were freed by the Islamist-led rebels. Reports say more than 30,000 people were either executed or died as a result of torture, starvation, or lack of medical care between 2011 and 2018. And with so many bodies, the authorities were forced to use rooms lined with salt as makeshift morgues to make up for the lack of cold storage.